lesson about right triangle trigonometry, where we are going to be discussing how to find angle measures. In this lesson, we'll still need our lovely mnemonic device, our SOHCAHTOA. Remember that our S is standing for the sine, C cosine, T tangent. We've had some use with it. Be mindful that we are still dealing with sine, cosine, and tangent. When we're solving equations, we need to do the inverse operation. So with addition, the inverse operation would be subtraction. If we had multiplication, the inverse would be division, and going vice versa. When we have our sine function, the inverse is going to be this sine to the negative 1 power. This represents the inverse of sine. And much like cosine, it'd be cosine negative 1, and so on, tan negative 1. We are going to be using the inverse function in order to help us find angle measures. So we get to our first problem here. We are missing this angle, but we're given two of the sides. And remember, this is a right triangle. So we're given the sides, and we still need to identify our sides. So from this angle, remember, if this is our angle across the triangle, that's our opposite side. Right next to this angle, that's our adjacent. Remember, the other side that's next to is the hypotenuse. That's always across from the right angle. This side, this is our adjacent side. So if we look at our mnemonic device, our SOHCAHTOA, which one uses opposite and adjacent? That would be the T, standing for tangent. So we need to use this function to set up our equation. So to write out our equation, we take the tan of x, remember this is where our angle goes, equals the opposite side, 13, divided by the adjacent side of 17. And now we're at a point where we need to solve the equation. Now, just as if we're solving this equation, 3x equals 9. So this similar idea, when we go to solve this equation, we're going to divide by 3. The opposite of multiplying by 3 is to divide by 3, where the 3's cancel. So if we divide by 3, so I'm bringing back this idea because when we go to solve this equation, we need to do the inverse of tan, which is taking that tan negative 1, doing the inverse to both sides of the equation. So we're going to take the tan negative 1 of this side, the tan of x, and we're going to plug in that 13 over 17 on the right side. Where on this side, the tan negative 1 and tan, they get to cancel out, so that we're just left with an x, and then we need to use our calculator to help with doing the tan inverse of 13 over 17. So we go to our calculator, we make sure we're in degree mode, and the inverse, so INV, that's how we get this function to show up. So we need the inverse, and on a calculator like Google, it's going to show up as arctan, and then we can type in our 13 divided by 17, and that would give us 37.40. Because this number is less than 5, I'm going to keep that as 37.4. So our solution is 37.4 degrees. Let's take a look at another example. Sometimes we're going to see this symbol. This symbol is called theta, and it just represents, it's a Greek symbol for an angle measure. We need to identify the sides. Across from the right angle, that's our hypotenuse. Right next to, that's our adjacent. So if we look at our mnemonic device, adjacent, hypotenuse, that's going to be our cosine. So this is our function, our equation we're going to set up. So cosine of the angle, cosine of theta equals the adjacent side, 23, divided by the hypotenuse of 51. From there, we need to solve the equation by doing the inverse of cosine on both sides of the equation. So this is going to cancel out, leaving us with just theta. Need to use our calculator. So again, we use the inverse cosine 23 divided by 51. 63.19, because this number is bigger than 5, we bump that up to 63.2. Here's our last example. We have this angle. Identify our sides. Across from it, that's our opposite side. Across from the right angle, that's our hypotenuse. So opposite and hypotenuse, O and H, that would be our sine function. So this is our equation we're setting up. So to write out the equation, sine of x equals 8 divided by 17. Then solve the equation by doing the inverse on both sides of the equation. So inverse of sine and the sine inverse of 8 over 17. So these are going to cancel, and we need our calculator. So the inverse of sine, 8 divided by 17, leaves us with 28.07. We'll bump that to 28.1 degrees.